This is the Take 10 channel, episode number 2. Dearest loved one, it was hard for me to write this letter because avoidance comes more easily to me. I am writing this because you are somebody who is very important to me, and I'd like to think that if you were going through a difficult time, you would feel free to talk to me openly and feel listened to and supported. I care about you so much, and yet it's really hard for me to talk about this to you. I am going through some very difficult times right now, and I want to help you understand why I might have been acting in ways that might not seem like me lately. I want to explain and maybe ask you to support me in some helpful ways if you'd like. You may be wondering why I have not asked you to talk about this before. I'm writing instead of calling or speaking to you in person because it's a really difficult thing to talk about. It's also not something that I'm used to doing. Expressing myself in writing feels safer right now. But one day, I hope to be able to talk to you about my depression and anxiety in the same way that we talk about everyday stuff. The big D, depression, is a daily struggle in my life. It's hard for me to articulate what this illness feels like. It's like having a fog between you and everything else in life. It's like having a backpack full of rocks that you carry with you everywhere. It wears you down. It's like walking through quicksand that no one else can see and hoping that today is not the day that you go under. Sometimes it's 1 minute at a time. It's hard to talk about because you tell me of all the beautiful things that are in my life that I should be grateful for and how I have so much. I can't argue, but it does not minimize the fact of the darkness. The most important thing that I want you to understand is that suffering from depression is much more than having a bad day or feeling stressed out. A bad day is just that, a bad day. And for most people, sadness may be a temporary emotion. Depression can make people feel miserable for weeks and months, or even years at a time. It's exhausting. It can make people hate themselves and their life. Surviving can become the goal of the day, and it surpasses all other ambition. It is a gut-wrenching, torturous, and incredibly courageous thing to live with depression. And that is an excerpt from a letter of an individual living with depression to their family and friends to help them better understand what it's like living with depression. Recently, we covered the differences of mental health and mental illness, and one of the more common mental illnesses that we talked about was depression. So tonight, I'd like to do a bit of a deeper dive into depression, specifically covering what it is, the different forms of depression, signs and symptoms of depression, treatment associated with depression, and lastly, a call to action. But before we dive in, let me first state that I am in no way a medical professional. I have no business in trying to diagnose or imply that if you have any of the symptoms that we're going to talk about, that you in fact have depression. My goal of this video is to raise awareness to different mental illnesses, the symptoms associated with it, and what it might be like to live with one of those diagnoses. If you have questions on whether you may or may not have a mental health or mental illness, I would encourage you to seek a medical professional for that discussion. And if you are currently in an emergency situation, to call 911, or if you're needing to speak to somebody, to call the Suicide Prevention Line. So what is depression? Depression is a common but serious mood disorder. It causes severe symptoms that affect how you feel, how you think, and how you handle daily activities. Those daily activities range from things such as sleeping and eating to work or your social life. And within depression, there are forms of depression that slightly differ from each other or that may develop under unique circumstances. Some forms of depression include persistent depressive disorder, which is a depressed mood that lasts at least 2 years. And a person with persistent depressive disorder may have episodes of major depression along with periods of less severe symptoms, but lives with symptoms of depression consistently for at least 2 years. Another form of depression includes postpartum depression. This is more serious than just having the baby blues that women experience after giving birth. Postpartum depression includes feelings of extreme sadness, anxiety, and exhaustion. This can happen during the pregnancy or after delivery. What makes this so difficult is that it's hard to complete daily care activities both for the mother and or for their child. Another form of depression includes seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. This is characterized by the onset of depression during winter months, typically when less natural sunlight is present. This type of depression usually lifts in the springtime, but will typically return every year. Bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is different from depression, but sometimes it is included with a list of types of depression because somebody living with bipolar disorder experiences extreme low moods that meet the criteria of major depression, but they also experience extreme highs as well. So what are the signs and symptoms of depression? This is not an all-inclusive list, but it may include persistent sadness, anxious or empty moods, feelings of hopelessness or pessimism, irritability, feelings of guilt, worthlessness or helplessness, loss of interest or pleasure in hobbies and activities, decreased energy or fatigue, moving or talking more slowly, feeling restless or having trouble sitting still, difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions, difficulty in sleeping, early morning awakening, or oversleeping, appetite and or weight changes, and thoughts of death or suicide attempts. Not everybody who is depressed or is diagnosed with depression experiences each of these symptoms. Some people will experience only a few, while others may experience many or all. I think that it also is important to note that typically in being diagnosed with depression, it includes individuals who experience some of those signs and symptoms for most of the day, nearly every day, for at least a 2-week period. For those living with depression, what does their treatment potentially look like? First, before we dive into that, let's just note that depression, even in the most severe cases, can be treated. The earlier you're able to begin treatment, the more effective it's going to be. And this treatment can include medications, psychotherapy, or a combination of the two. Should those treatments not reduce symptoms, there are other options that can be explored, including electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, and other brain stimulation therapies that an individual may explore. Beyond medication and psychotherapy, Some additional things for individuals living with depression include trying to help with their depression, include trying to be more active and to get exercise, to spend time with other people, to confide in trusted friends and relatives, and to avoid isolation and allow others to help you. It's so difficult to live with depression, and it's difficult to know, to love and care about somebody who lives with depression, because we're not always sure how to best help them. But our call to action today and moving forward comes from that same letter that I read at the beginning. Yes, every day I try to fight it with all of my tools. Some days I win and others not. This letter may leave you feeling helpless. If you'd like to help, there are some things that you can do. Although they may seem small, they are incredibly significant. First, please don't judge me. It's hard enough to have to deal with it without feeling that I am minimized for it. People who are depressed often feel extremely alone or abandoned. They feel incredibly vulnerable and exposed. Second, just listen. It can be very cathartic to talk about what hurts. You have no idea how wonderful it feels to know that I can talk to you and vent without fear. Third, even when I don't respond and you text me or check in, it makes me feel cared for. Sometimes I don't have the energy to respond right away, but I know that you are there. Last, it helps me if you remind me that it's possible to overcome. Depression is an evil sorcerer that makes your brain think that this is all there is. Without being fake, when you remind me that there is hope, that I have won the battle previously, that there is light ahead, and that things will change, it makes me want to get help and keep on fighting. Thank you, and I love that you were able to read this. It means more than I can say in words. There is so much going on in the world that wants to bring us down. But each day as individuals, we have a choice. A choice on the person that we want to be. So as we go about our daily life, let us make the choice to do, to be, and to inspire good in all that we do. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time.